Hey, everybody.
Hey, Garrett.
Hey, Derek.
Let's start doing social intros. If people want to say where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic, that'd be great. And I'll start locking things down and getting things ready.
I guess I'm the furthest this side, so I'll start.
Go ahead.
My name is Neil Ross. I'm a writer and an actor, and I'm interested in understanding personality through the hemispheres of the brain. And my absolute ideal outcome would be to have figured out the hemispheres enough so that I could write a scene with two characters playing both sides of the brain.
Oh, cool. I love it. I hope that we'll get you to that point. Remco's a pretty smart guy, so I have a feeling he'll get you enough to be able to get there. At least I'll be surprised if he doesn't, but yeah, great to have you.
Thanks.
And glad that this will serve as some creative inspiration. I'm all about creative inspiration. So welcome, Neil. And anyone else want to introduce themselves?
I'm Jared. I'm an engineer. What interests me with this is I'm trying to actually stimulate the right side of the brain, because I know that's where a lot of the creativity and like basically everything that's noticeable or impactful comes from that, and that's how we communicate better. So I like to understand how to at least tap into that side easier.
Cool. Welcome, Jared. Where are you located, if you can share?
Connecticut.
Connecticut. And what about you, Neil?
Toronto.
Toronto. Cool. Anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Oh, I'm Alan Moxon from Hamilton, Ontario. I've been just studying spirituality and psychology for years, and it seems to fit my study plans. And I watched the video, and it was very, very interesting, thought-provoking. So I decided to listen in.
Cool. Welcome. You may want to stay tuned, and you may want to join. Well, hopefully we'll be able to share with whatever meetup you joined from. But I'm in the very beginning stages of collaborating on a sort of spiritual subset of the FTI that might be of interest to you, since you're into spirituality. So I have a friend that's very into spirituality, and I am myself. So we'll probably have like a subgroup of the FTI, just like we're in the beginning stages of starting an FTI Stoa. So for Stoicism. So we're gonna have some child sub-organizations coming up.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Great. Peter, go ahead.
Good evening. Well, I just wanted to, in addition, introduce myself. I have a thing I'm going to at 8, so I'll probably be here for a brief amount of time than I usually am. But I'm Peter from the Washington area, and I've sort of joined this group and some others like it. I think there's like a Jordan Peterson group that I'm part of. It's just anything basically in a secular meetup group, and so anything that has sort of a philosophical edge to it.
This chair, I
Um,
go where I like. It Brazil.
And yeah, so I mean, philosophy was my background. So, and then this particular topic is very interesting because I'm always intrigued by this sort of dynamic of well, I guess our speaker will explain further, but sort of the difference between sort of the more logical and the analytical sort of viewpoint of the world, and sort of the more and of course the right brain, which is more intuitive and emotional and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting topic in that regards, and of course has corollaries in the world outside of psychology as well, philosophies. In addition to that.
Peter, where in Washington are you?
Oh, Washington D.C. So I'm right
Washington
outside.
D.C. Okay.
Sorry, not Washington State.
That other Washington.
The other one.
The one that's the head of government, but they don't make nearly as good wine as the other Washington. I like the one that makes the wine rather than the one that makes the laws. So I think the one that makes the laws needs some wine from the one that makes the wine, to be honest. So
right.
Flip flop, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was also reading, per the earlier conversations, I was reading that it was somewhere that the Stoicism, where that term actually came from. I think Stoa was actually like an architectural, it was like a porch or something, because it's where the Stoics would meet. I think that's why they call them that. Like they would meet on this porch.
Porch. Yeah,
Stoa. Yeah.
Cool. Lisa, you have your hand up.
I'm from Marysville, Washington. I'm right now in the U District in Washington State. I am MTE. My mom is the opposite of me. And I have, of my 56 years, it's been a rocky, rocky, rocky road. And if I can find a way to help us, that's what I'm after.
Cool.
Thank you.
Keep my fingers crossed. Remco's a pretty good presenter, so I think hopefully he'll have some good advice. And if not, ask him questions, because he loves hard questions like me. So Remco and I are both the kind of people that we like the questions more than the presentation. So definitely ask him hard questions. He'll eat it up. Joe, go ahead. Thanks, Lisa.
So I'm Joe. I'm from Philadelphia, and I come here quite often. And just recently been in contact with Gareb, and we're going to actually be setting up our own STOA. So we're excited about that in conjunction with the FTI. So that's something that's exciting, and that's why one of the reasons I'm always happy to be here. It's always an interesting topic. This evening is a particular interest. I'm learning a little bit about Iain McGilchrist's theories, but in trying to compare and contrast them more or less to Kahneman's, Daniel Kahneman's approach to theories on the brain, because they're not necessarily in agreement on everything. So that's I find it to be pretty interesting, and hopefully we can explore that a little bit. Good to see everyone.
Good to see you, Joe. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Carl. I actually live in Olympia, Washington. That's why I was asking Peter where he was. I love this group. I love to learn. I'm curious about pretty much everything. And I once heard McGilchrist actually talk about the two hemispheres, and I was kind of fascinated. His book is on my list. I haven't read it yet, so I figured I'll just take the shortcut here and try to learn as much as I can from Remco's lecture. I presented, was it last week? Last week I presented on the Big Five personality system, and hope to present soon on self-actualization. So I'm really excited about that.
Excellent. Really enjoyed your talk last week, Carl, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Michael, you're welcome. Thank you. Michael.
My name's Michael. I live in New Jersey. I'm a member of the FTI, and I come to these meetings as frequently as I can. I always get a lot out of both the presentations and the questions, and I especially like that it's always done in a spirit of inquiry, not antagonism. And one of the reasons I usually come to these, but one thing that I learned that really, really interested me is the fact that when dolphins, porpoises, and whales sleep, they sleep on one half of their brain at a time while the other half is awake.
Interesting.
And that really got me interested in the two hemispheres. And so I want to learn more tonight.
Cool. That's a new fact for me. That's very interesting. Carrie, why don't you go next?
Okay, name's Carrie. I am from North Seattle in Washington. Love science, love the philosophy of science in particular. It seems like a really interesting talk. I've heard rumors that the whole left-right hemisphere of the brain has been overstated in previous literature. I'm curious to hear what the speaker's impression is of that, and if that's true or not, or at least indicated by the current state of research.
Will you be covering that, Remco?
Yes, to some extent, a little.
Great.
Yeah, as far as I can. Yeah.
I had someone claim that in a past event, and I fact checked it afterwards, and I felt like it. The criticisms of the right and the left brain were more like nuances, like criticisms of it's not black and white, left and right are this and that. It's more that there's nuance. Or I think it was the different parts of the brain. Actually, I'm thinking of mammalian, reptilian parts of the brain, but all of the things having to do with the brain have nuance. So I guess that wasn't a surprise to me, but still the generalizations are fairly accurate, I think. But we'll get into your presentation. Remco, did you want to do a social intro as well?
Yeah, I just want to say good day to everybody, and also look, first of all, Remco. I live in the Antipodes. That is, drill a hole through where you live, most of you, drill a hole through the center of the earth, and you come out where I live, more or less. Or if I'd like to put it another way, the Antipodes of where I live, which is in Perth, in Western Australia, you come out where Bermuda is, roughly, more or less. Anyhow, Garrett, I just wanted to take this excuse to say you're doing a wonderful job. It's always a great pleasure to jump in and participate in your conversations, because there's more to life than just filling your head with knowledge. It's also about knowing how to question that knowledge and to create perspective. So it's a great delight to be able to participate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and really appreciate you being a part of it, Remco. Like we're a community, and it's not just me presenting, right? It's the community presenting to each other. I'm the founder of the community, and I am the default presenter if I can't find anyone else, but I always appreciate when other people want to present. So that goes for anyone here. If you have a topic you want to present on, I'll be putting my name in the my email in the chat, so you can reach out to me. We always like guest presenters. So that said, David, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Always looking forward to these interesting presentations. I've learned so much these last 2 or 3 years via Zoom, and the brain, of course, is where it's at. Being a left-handed person, I really am interested in this left brain, right brain stuff. And of course, the decisions get made somewhere, unless you believe in a God or something like that. And I'm voting for somewhere in the visual part of the cortex, because every time I think I want to have a hamburger, I visualize a hamburger. So it's got to be in the visual space somewhere. But I think it's one of our great adventures that I think we're going to find it one of these days and answer a lot of questions. But thanks for putting these things on, Garrett.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And you're saying that the big question is what again?
Of where the decision point is in the brain.
Yeah. So we had an event on consciousness, and I made, I think, a fairly good argument that it's not in the brain, that it's a metaphysical decision. The decision point happens like in the subconscious, like metaphysically, before it happens physically, and then it goes into the nanotubules in the brain, and that's how it like enters the brain. That's research done by Penrose and Hammerstein. But we could talk about that another day. I don't want to digress. But thank you, David. Sean, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean. I live in Salisbury, Maryland. More I attended this meetup group, more I feel I'm not a philosopher. But I do enjoy science, okay, especially how our brain functions. Why is a set of facts? We interpret facts in different way, okay? Doesn't matter left brain or right brain. So I'm just try to understand more about how our brain functions. Thank you.
Great. I'm sure we'll all learn more about how the brain functions today, and I'm excited about that. That said, I think we'll go ahead and get started because I don't see any more hands up, and it is 7 o'clock, which is typically when we kick things up. Remco, there should be a share screen up arrow at the bottom. You should have that no matter what. Are you seeing that? Great. Okay, so that'll be where you do the sharing of the screen. So I just want to do a quick intro. That tonight's event is brought to you by the Free Thinker Institute. We go by FTI for the acronym because I come from a world of acronyms. And we're a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. We advertise to a lot of meetup groups, so you may have seen us in a different meetup group, but the FTI is the sort of the core behind hosting tonight's event. We focus on helping members be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair through transformational personal and professional development. We have free events like this one every Tuesday evening, covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. And we also have weekly members-only events to apply practical wisdom into our daily lives. We have only one rule in the FTI, and we do take it very seriously because there's only one and we got to take it seriously. And that is to remain polite. That's just because we want to keep everyone in the logical portion of the brain. Joe was kind enough to remind people in the chat that system 1 is fast thinking unconscious, which is often sometimes emotional, and system 2 is the conscious thinking. We want people in the more rational, conscious thinking part of the brain, because that's where we learn the most, and we have the best arguments and the best conversations, not even arguments, just conversations and sharing of opinions. And so I recommend always listening to understand other people. We call listening suspending our own beliefs to listen to what someone else is saying and why they came to their beliefs, as listening to understand in the FTI. And that said, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker tonight, which is Remco. And I think he does the best job introducing himself. He's got a famous life that he can share, and we're really happy to have him speaking tonight. He's done a lot of really cool stuff and has a lot to teach. And so thank you, Remco, for agreeing to speak tonight. And I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. And it's always a great pleasure to be with the Free Thinkers Institute. And I really wish the Institute well in shaking the tree. And our tree does need shaking, because we've got our tried and proven ways of looking at the world, and it's rather uncomfortable to be challenged, and we'll easily find reasons why what is being presented to us is faulty, or whatever argument you come up with, because we're always intent on preserving our sense of a place in the world and our view of the world. I speak from firsthand experience, and it doesn't come without comfort. So this evening, we're going to run through some slides. The topic has been presented in text. We will follow the process of going through the slides. I'm always happy to take questions, but Garrett, I'll leave that to you to manage.
Yeah, I will say we hold questions till the end, and that way Remco can kind of present everything as a continuous flow. Based on popular demand, people wanted to hear the speaker present their arguments before hearing all of the counter questions, etc. So we save those until the end.
Okay, well, with that, let's begin. And I'm just going to put up a slide, and hopefully, let's see. Well, first of all, I've got to share the screen. We'll do that. And I'll put up my motorbike, which is my screen saver. Your screen is loading, it says, and you should be seeing a sunrise with my favorite mode of transport there.
Pretty nice motorcycle there.
Yeah, that's it. Now you know what I ride. Okay, let us now put up the slide. And let's see how we go. All right. Okay, you should be seeing a chessboard. Sorry, a little bit of a private first slide. I just wanted to slip that in. I'm a bit naughty here. My motivation for participating and contributing whenever I can is this. And what's going on? Oh, wrong one. Yeah. Okay. Here we should go. I'm concerned that people see things very black and white, very harshly, and they tend to ignore the fuller context, both in time and in place. And I think perhaps at the end of their presentation will make a little bit more sense. But, you know, the world is filled with knee-jerkers. And I think it's time to just stand back a little bit. Anyway, so that's my little private little entry. Okay, this is my first slide. It represents Delphi. Now, Delphi was a city in ancient Greece. You can visit it today, and on the temple of Apollos was this statement, know thyself. We all know that it's quite a famous statement, but who really understands it? Look, it is conjectural, and I'm going to propose a meaning to what know thyself means. And by the way, just a little background here. My great motivation in doing this presentation, I'll be doing another one, not necessarily through the Free Thinker Institute, on trust. But, you know, the important thing that I got is I spent 9 years at university filling my head with stuff. And what I didn't realize that those 3 pounds of gray matter, that all stuff in my head, is not just gray matter. It actually has some things that I can manage, some things that I can use at least, even if I cannot change it, to recognize that. And that is all I aim to do. If I take you a little bit away from that 3 pound organic slushy stuff between your ears and take you to a place where you start to think, maybe there is something there, then I have succeeded. How far I'm going to we go this evening, well, that's up to you. Okay, so know thyself. What does that mean? And I think I'm going to give you some clues to what it might mean. So we're going to start, as you know, with the divided brain. And I've given a bit of a graphic presentation there, with the left as being rather mechanistic and the right being more organic. It's not a good description at all, actually. I think McGilchrist would be horrified. But, you know, just as to make it a bit extreme and black and white, which I said I wouldn't do. So the essence of tonight is focus versus context. Focus, you know, that thing you do like with symbolically with a microscope, and the context is to look at the bigger picture, because they are often at conflict with one another, and sometimes dramatically to the point where we're seeing wars. So our main theme for this evening is Iain McGilchrist's thesis, The Master and His Emissary. Quite a tome, 500 pages, very tedious, hard work. He's written another one called The Matter of Things, and would you believe that's 1,500 pages. So not an easy one. However, I'm not going to stay entirely with McGilchrist, because I'm also going to introduce Daniel Kahneman. Now, Daniel and I will make a distinction between these two. They're not conflicting at all. They just have different approaches, and that will make sense. Okay, so the divided brain. Now, it's important to note, first of all, that that nature doesn't create redundancy. Not you know, we do have 2 kidneys and 2 lungs, and you know, there is some redundancy, yes. But by and large, you have to ask yourself, why do we have 2 brains? And it's a conjectural one for some. Let me explain a bit later. So Iain McGilchrist has written, as I said, those 2 books. One, as I've described, the one we're going to use tonight, and of course, The Matter with Things, when the more recent one came out last year. And it's about the divided brain. And this you will see. Actually, I'm just going to see whether I can make that a laser pointer. Here, that's better. Okay, so the divided brain, and the left and right hemispheres, and in between we have the corpus callosum. Now, that will have some meaning a little bit later on. It's the bridge between the two, and at one time there was actually surgery done which separated the two. That's no longer as popular, but anyway. So what this thesis is that the 2 views, 2 sides of the brain promote divergent views. And the important thing to get is that the right, and only the right, creates a complete perspective. Stay with that. Now, the actors in this, let me call them the actors. is this little character here. And he will be occurring throughout. He is blind. He is the left brain. He is also the conscious one. Because the left brain, and under the McGilchrist thesis, is about precision, logic, abstract logic, and usefulness. And that is, have somebody with a microphone on. Kelly. Okay, the emissary. Okay, and we have also the master, who is comprehensive. It's interconnected, meaning everything is brought into processing. And above all, it has no intention. It has no particular purpose. It just is. So that is the distinction between the left and the right. The left has purpose, usefulness. The right is all about just integrating it and seeing the bigger picture. Now, let's just clear up one thing. The left brain is about logic, analysis, sequencing, blah, 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 blah. The right brain is the creative one, the one with imagination. Forget it, please. This is pop psychology. Some of this was, I think his fellow's name was Jeans. I think it came out, and I think he's created a bit of a stigma against the McGilchrist thesis. It's unfortunate. Move on from it. It is much more nuanced, subtle, and it's important to make to just put that behind you. Okay, so forget it. Now, I'm just going to jump in here to first to Daniel Kahneman. Now, Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist, and he wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. It's an exceedingly popular book. Indeed, they outsold McGilchrist 10-1. So if you're a popularist, you'll go to Daniel Kahneman. But you know, the important point to make is that Kahneman is a psychologist and is working in the laboratory environment and strictly behavioral, strictly empirical. And his thesis, I'm not diminishing him by any means. It's very important. Okay. He uses a dual process as well. Instead of using hemispheres, he uses systems, system 1 and system 2. And it's about the individual. Whereas McGilchrist tends to be more about society and over time. But don't use the societal part as a reason to stand aside and saying it's less useful. Just bear with me on that one. So system 1, somebody asked the question in the chats, what is that? Well, it's the processing which is unconscious, it's extremely fast, it's automatic, and it's emotional. So that is what he uses as one part of that dual system of the mind. Now, the system 2 it's slow. It's conscious. In other words, you're aware that you're doing it. It's very deliberate and it's very logical. Now, the important part to take out of this, and it's relevant to Kahneman's thesis and to McGilchrist's thesis, both of them, that what one calls the right brain and the other one calls a system 2, in a sense. So be careful about this. You are only aware of the this system 2 in this, and you are confusing yourself when you are talking about the slow, deliberate, logical side. There is another part of you, and that is what in the Kahneman's world is your system 1. You're not aware of it. And some argue that, that 90% of your processing happens unconsciously. Some even argue 100%, but you know, let's just stay with the majority is processed unconsciously. Okay, so we have system 1, system 2. System 1 is fast, and system 2 is slow and discretionary. So as I said already, sorry, I should have made it clearer. So who you think you are is not only the slow system, but a minority view. That's under Kahneman, okay? A little graphic here, quote from Kahneman, where he says we have excessive confidence in what we believe we know and an inability to acknowledge our ignorance. I'm thinking of Dick Cheney, huh? Dick Cheney said, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Anyway, all right, moving on. Our coherence about the world comes from the way the mind works. So this is part of my enthusiasm for going down this road, is get to know your brain. I'm hoping that you'll come away this evening with a feeling of a little bit greater familiarity with how your brain might be working. And it's important to get this also, that the mind is susceptible to ongoing errors, systemic errors, and you will make them time and time and time again. And again, many of our decisions go on in silence. And that's why Kahneman talks about a minefield. And he makes that point. He said, the best I can do is to be aware of the minefield, because I will make that mistake again and again. Because you're dealing with the unconscious, that's system one. The problem is, and this is all Kahneman's thesis that I'm presenting to you now, that system one's domination creates an overconfidence and a flawed decision-making. And yeah, I've had to live with that one. And there's some stories I could share on my big mistakes in life. Anyway. So it's fast, it's delicious. But your system two is slow and it's on discretion. It's important to see that weakness that we have. So let's go back to McGilchrist now. And we're dealing with the brain, the divided brain, as he puts it, and it's nuanced. And we have the left brain with that symbolic of the little blind fellow, and the master as the right brain. So we have two systems of the mind. The left brain is the focused one. It's aggressive, it's grasping, it's about utility and gain. And in particular, time and time again, I need to say this, and I hope you'll take this away from my talk. It is abstracted from the bigger picture. And you'll see in a moment why I've got the man left brain blind, because he relies on the input from the right, from the master. All this hopefully will make sense. If it doesn't, just stay with me. Again, I'm repeating, the right brain has no intention. It sees complexity. It sees interconnectedness. It's often waffly. It is hesitant. It doesn't create a very confident picture sometimes. And that's uncomfortable in this world. I'll come back to that. Another important part here is that the dominance in society swings over time, from a left brain dominant to a right brain dominant to a left brain dominant. It's quite interesting. And there's some very interesting evidence for that. So we have the Greeks, who are predominantly left brain, as were the Romans. But, there were some exceptions. The Christian were more right, at least at first. And then you have the Enlightenment left and so on. Okay. So both Kahneman and McGilchrist agree about that silent part of the brain, because Einstein said, and I wish I'd gotten it. I wish I'd gotten it, because I denied my intuitive, and I think I did damage to myself and my career and my relationships with the world. We do have an intuitive, and respect it. It does the processing. If you're stuck, sleep on it. Go for a walk. So as he's almost saying what McGilchrist is saying, he's talking about the rational mind is a servant. It's perhaps not so faithful, however, but we'll say about that. And this is the important one. And you have to just accept this and reflect on it afterwards. A very important message, I feel. We've created a society that favors the servant with its quick, fast answers. And we have forgotten the gift. The gift is the intuitive. The message I tried to create with this graphic is that we relate to the world by shifting our focus on how we focus, either using the microscope or the telescope. There's a really good reason, as McGilchrist makes clear, why the brain is divided, and it's good for good reason. It enables, and I'm just going to go through these points quickly, just to because it's too many points to digest. Don't worry too much about it if you're missing it. The point is there is a need for that divided brain, but it's nuanced. It isn't like what I said earlier about being creative or being rational. That's too simplistic. So you need all these the emphasis of the left and the right brain. The last point is perhaps important. Let me just dwell on that for a second. Is that the right brain sometimes gets stuck, and it can't come up with an answer. So what it does, it presents to the left brain for processing. The master presents to the left brain, to the emissary for processing. That's what the left brain is for. It's very skilled at that. And then there is a potential breakdown, is that what is processed should go back to the right brain for contextualization. I'll come back to that. If it doesn't make sense, I'm just introducing the point now. It should go back, and that leads to the cue of why the theme is the master and the emissary. The master, he has the bigger over picture of the world. The left brain has just a little sub-package of information, and that is sub-package should be returned after processing to the right, but it isn't always. The divided brain has been around for millennia, and the Upanishads, which is an ancient Indian Sanskrit, has it that it talks about the space between. He talks metaphorically, the bridge, the corpus callosum, and it keeps the two worlds apart, and that's important. You must keep the two worlds apart for very good functional reasons. And that's where I got that little rectangle there, the bridge between the two.
아빠, 아빠가 너 밥 먹으래.
Mei Lee, you have your microphone on. Could you switch it off, please?
I muted her.
Good, thank you. Okay, so that's the important part there. And we are, a little symbolically, the right and left brain and the bridge between the two hemispheres. It's not the best of metaphors, but it will do for the purpose. So we have two minds and two focus systems. Again, the symbolic microphone and the tree on the right there. So we have what I've already talked about, and the corpus callosum enables the two incompatible views of the world. Again, because you have to feel this. The left is narrowly focused on need, and the right is everything else, but without our awareness. Two views and two ways to relate. The left brain has no context. The left brain will talk. It will talk as if there is no outside world. It will be a denier. It will say, at a time when there is a big freeze, how can we have global warming? It will see things out of context. You could probably guess at the author of that word, of those words. It's blind because it's the right that dispatches everything that it knows. It comes from the left. It comes from the right, presented to the left for unpacking and consideration. So the left is blind, and it's abstract to realities. It doesn't want to go there. And again, you're going to see this, and I'm hammering it already. Our society rewards simple answers because we are so overloaded with information. We're all so tense that we don't want all the complexity. We don't want to listen to a waffler because that is inherently what a right brain represents. It will present both sides. So the factual views need the unconscious, the master. And again, the return from the left need not happen. That left brain. I'm not denigrating the left. It's very important, but we need to be able to catch it. So the right brain creates context. Big picture, fuzzy, very fast, and without intention. It needs the left. The right desperately needs the left. No, that's important. It energizes it. It organizes. It systematizes all the things that engineers, as I was in my career. It needs the left, and you reward it. You feel comfortable in it. You want to stay there. Actually, it's almost seductive. But its client of the left, the emissary, not only slow. Oh, I'm sorry. I've actually made a mistake here. No, I'm sorry. I'm going too fast for my brain. Let me start again on that last point. Its client, the emissary, that is the left, is not only slow, it may not return the project. And it leaves the master, frustrated. So we have two brains. The aware right brain, big picture. I'm hammering in a lot of repetition here, but by repeating it, I hope you'll get the feeling. And it's very inclined to the cohesion of the two dispositions, that is of the right and the left. And we have the left brain. It's unaware, it's abstract, it's logical, all the things I've talked about. It's also inclined to optimism, no small point. It's inclined to optimism because it doesn't see the bigger picture. And again, I've said it a few times now, it may not necessarily share what it has evolved back to the right. It's blind. It needs to be said, it is blind. And that is the trap. Here we have the master and the emissary, and we have the conscious left brain, and it continues to delude itself that what we know is complete. No, it isn't. Its so-called factual views are incomplete without integration by the master. And so we've got the emissary running away with its gift, leaving the master frustrated with incomplete information. Okay, I'm going to just introduce this uncomfortable topic. I say uncomfortable because it is uncomfortable for me. I was very uncomfortable about this Galileo affair, and if you watched my presentation on postmodernism, you'll see some of the detail from it. This is going back 4 centuries to a time which was called the Galileo affair. You had the Pope and you had Galileo. And at that time, Copernicus had, on his deathbed, allowed for the publishing of a thesis that showed that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. And that was very confronting to the church. So Galileo was placed under house arrest by the Pope. He was told basically to shut up. So the 21st century view, and that was my view until a decade ago, was that the Pope hindered the truth to protect his flock. And, we're living in a different culture, and I think this is the important point to make here. And at that time, if you have some empathy, going back 4 centuries, that was the era of the Reformation. The 30-Year War, which was a violent religious war in Europe, was still raging at the time. It was a time when the glue of society is different to the glue of today. Then it was faith. Today it is about truth and facts. So take your glasses off and step back 4 centuries, and you begin to become a little bit more, hopefully, sympathetic to the Pope's quandary. And there was a philosopher, one of the great philosophers of science, Paul Feyerabend. He emigrated, I think, from Germany, or was it Austria, to live in California. and he's one of the great philosophers of science. And he said the Pope was actually more rational than Galileo was. Yeah, that's a bit confronting, but he's got a point. So Galileo had insufficient empirical evidence, and again, my point again, that society was very different. Okay, the Greeks, very left brain. There are many signs of that. Socrates, he was one of the first great philosophers. He lost trust in intuition and respect for the body. Plato had a distaste for emotion and mistrusted the body as well, adopted by the religious. And the Greek, they were actually a pretty dour lot. If you look at their statues, they're all pretty serious looking. They're very left-brained, and there are many, many signs of that. If you go and read McGilchrist's book to get the sense of that. So, yes, they were a dour bunch. The Reformation, as an evidence, I just want to show you just a little cue of an important aspect, that the domination of the left brain and the right brain swings over time. So I'm just going to pick just a little example here. The Reformation. Before the Reformation, you can see here, this is the altar. This is the altar where the focus was. It was on spirituality. And on the left, if you go into a church in Europe, you can see this feature very commonly. And by that, you can date the church. And on the left, you have the pulpit. That is where the priest would speak from. So that was the situation before the Reformation. So we have the arrow there. Now, after the Reformation, what you will see, and I've got a modern church that applies to the churches after that time, it is the pulpit that is at the center, and you'll have to go to the side somewhere to find the altar, and the word has become dominant. So by that, you have a left brain dominant society where the word takes more gravity than the spirit. So we had what was once a right brain dominant to the left brain. Look, in isolation, you may wish to like to contest it, but read the book and look at some of the other examples I may come up with. This expression is evident everywhere. So one fellow here, this is a representation of Bertrand Russell. Now, Bertrand Russell was one of the great philosophers of the early 20th century, and he was, very decontextualized. He was about precision, logic, and detail. And there he was very much left brain. But I'll come back to him in a moment. I'll just say something. The right brain, many examples. I would argue Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche died in about 1891 by memory, and he was very much a right brainer, very much more about the holistic, and the importance of intuition, metaphor, and the interconnectedness of all things. Just as a closing comment, Bertrand Russell evolved, and it's interesting when you look at the later Bertrand Russell, he became much more right-brained, and I find that fascinating. I myself I've sort of followed that course in life myself, from a very strong left-brainer to acknowledging the importance of the right brain, and it's made a huge difference to my life and my connection with the world. Anyhow, what can we say about society today? Well, one fellow, Alex de Tocqueville, I think he was an American by memory, and he wrote a very famous thesis about 2 centuries ago. And he said, society is evolving into becoming servile, with rules overriding unresolved issues. He also said that rules will the consequences with all these rules, it will compress, innovate, take the energy, stupefy, making us timid, and marshaled by government. That was his thesis. Now, what has happened? Well, I think he's right. I think work and leisure is sort of, so-called leisure has become symbolic. People spend 5 hours per night watching the television to spend times on games. Our relationship is more about utility rather than feeling. that need for, complementation. Our thinking is dominantly rational logic, mechanistic. And hey, isn't it tempting? Because it produced lots of goodies, but just be mindful of what we're doing to ourselves. Very much less metaphorical thought, very much less big picture. Schizoid, that's what McGilchrist calls us. He says we have become an extremely schizoid society, more so than it's ever been in the past cycles. We have become an I in the world. It's me versus the world. It's become an Apollonian order. Now, Apollonian is a term that Nietzsche introduced. It's about structure. It's about the columns you can see when you go to the Acropolis in Athens. It's perfect. It's structure. It's hassle. All that playfulness that we used to have prior to the ancient Greek philosophers, is, the Dionysian is being suppressed. We have to ask what life is about. Again, algorithms. Our work position is clearly defined. Everything is under central control. We're becoming adjuncts to machines. Attitude, optimism, even paranoia, feelings of emptiness, very much left brain stuff. You could question me here, come back later on, say, how can you say it's left brain? Well, anyway, I'll come back to them. And an excessive misplaced rationalism and decontextualized reasoning. We're being dehumanized. So why is it? Well, many reasons. The left has a neural advantage. It's not only slower to process, but in particular, its processing across the corpus callosum is slow. So, if you can blurt it out, you'll blurt it out. And where will it come from? The left brain. It's also your language center, remember? Think back to the church picture. It's your language. So again, I've said many of these things before. Utility, the left always has an intention, rational, positive, and provides simple answers. How appealing is that? And so our society is becoming increasingly specialized. We're increasingly specialized. We're even working from home alone. What is that doing to us? What is it doing to being able to maintain an overview? It's so natural disposition to take the abstract view. And what McGilchrist says, the out of context, narrow focus left, the emissary is winning the game. As he says, as you can read, it's without historical precedent. This little man is winning. Another quote. You can read it if you wish. And he calls us the 21st century schizoid man. I'm encouraged by Einstein talking about the intuitive. And let me bare myself here and say, look, I was sufficiently arrogant to dismiss the intuitive because it's often misused. People use it as an excuse to follow absurd thinking, like the linking COVID with 5G towers. My intuitive says, and they use it like a weapon, like a shield. That's a misuse. I begin to respect my intuitive, and I wish I had discovered it much earlier in life. So there we are. That's who you are, and it is perfect. What you have to realize is that is who you are, and you have to be able to balance and to recognize both halves of you. and it isn't quite polar. I've really made that point. Love you as you are, as that person. The Society of the Spectacle was a book that was written in 1976 by Guy Debord. And I'm going a bit far. I think I should have showed the other slide first. I think, anyway, you can read it. His thesis, here we are. I think that this slide should have been shown. I'm sorry, I will afterwards put this slide first. Philosopher Guy Debord, he felt that our society is being replaced by representation. Put another way, is that we are confusing the map for reality. We're giving much more credence to the map, that piece of paper, rather than putting it aside and saying, well, actually, that is just a representation. And there are others like Guy Debord, like Paul, the French philosopher, Baudrillard. Yeah, he also said much the same. And he makes that point. He said, all that was once directly lived has become representation. And we are moving from a world of being into having, and now having into merely appearing. We're creating avatars. It's about how we present ourselves in the world with all the glitz. Sure, there are exceptions to that you may want to put out, but as an overall trend, I tend to agree with that. Very much on the line of what McGilchrist is also saying. Remember, McGilchrist is different to Kahneman, because McGilchrist is more about society. But in the process, it's a mirror onto yourself. And this is where the strength of McGilchrist's thesis comes from. So how might society evolve under this? Well, it's very seductive to look at all the goodies that we've got these vaccines that are keeping us well, keeping us from disease. We're going to Mars. We're so specialized, and we're living, thanks to medicine, long, healthy lives. So we've got a lot of temples to the left brain, and it's very difficult to then just say, well, yes, but that's only part of living. The right brain, I'm saying, is somewhat withering. It's debasing our humanity and our capacity for real happiness. And our friendships and our relationships are becoming more about usefulness. And if they're not useful to us, we tend to drop them. And again, confusing the map for the territory. Look, I'm having a bit of a poke. I live in another world. I find the Bill of Rights, promoting individual rights over the collective, a very dangerous concept. I live in a part of the world where we don't have a Bill of Rights. And I used to say, look, we need to follow the Americans. Well, I'm not so sure nowadays. I think I've seen expressions where people talk about their right not to wear masks and their right to work and all these other things. Well, yeah, I find that very distressing. Here, this is another presentation in its own right. It's the thing about the political system where it's increasingly about scoring over the other party, not so much about the value of what's being discussed. It is simply about winning. It is about winning. What about the people? What about the actual issue? What about, and this is all about winning. This is left brain stuff. And of course, the thing, perhaps we need to accept it, that the currency and trade, it's all about utility and profit. Money is so dominant that it just amplifies and ossifies our way of being. Look, I'm not saying, and look, I'm getting close to the end of my presentation, I think. What are we up to? But it's just an awareness. That's all I'm asking. If you could just develop a little bit of an awareness and just step outside for a moment and see yourself, see society. Okay, I'm going to just talk about me because I'll talk a little bit about me. I'm very passionate about this because I've began to see how valuable my silent right focus system is. It's my intuitive. And again, I remind about what Albert Einstein said. And please have a look at this. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift. And I've already read it out, so, you know. I have to learn, and I'm still struggling with this, is to be, you know, comfortable with sometimes my hesitancy, my fluffiness, my waffling. I do waffle, but it's all right, because you see, I'm often find myself looking at the world and say, yeah, I mean, Gaza and the Ukraine are hot topics. But, you know, step into time and step into space, and you sometimes see that there isn't a black and white, however tempting it is. It is so tempting to step into one camp or the other, and you'll be rewarded for it. There'll be lots of people that will pat you on the back. I learn to be in my discomfort with the people that are conservative. I have to learn to be comfortable with those that are conspiracy minded. By the way, just in brackets here, let me just have a quick say in this. Conspiracy theories are really unfortunate titles, in my view. I would rather that term be dropped altogether, because whilst these people may be talking absolute BS, underneath it, there is something else going on which we don't hear. There is another message. There is another conversation going on. Those 6th of January so-called insurrectionists, they're quite an amazing bunch, and I haven't got time to talk about it. But there is a conversation going on. These insurrectionists, so-called, are people that are communicating something. And I'm not sure that many of the people are hearing it. Yes, they've got to be jailed. Yes, we have to punish them or whatever. But we also need to listen to them. So the word conspiracy theory, however nonsensical it might be on the face, is also a communication. It's often about trust. And in particular, when you're stuck, go for a walk. Don't, you know, if you're in an argument, just walk away after a few minutes and say, look, I think we just need to leave this. Don't try and win the battle. Go for a walk and come back later, because you'll often find other answers and perspective is created. And in that time, you will allow the left brain to inform the master, and the left brain to process, of course, as well, because the left brain is slower. It's important. Sleep on it. So that's what I learned. So I just thought I'd share that. And that is my concluding slide. And why have I got this up, this bird cage? Well, because I'm very clear is that I created the bird cage for myself with bars that I could not see. And throughout my life, I had these bars up. And what philosophy has done, and what all those readings has done, is made those bars visible. Now, it's not to say I'm shaking those bars off. It's not to say that I'm necessarily a free bird, as I'm showing there. No, it is just simply being able to see it. And from time to time, just give myself permission to say, okay, you're human, mate. Just stand aside, and you've made a mistake. Clear it up with the other person. But at the very least, often just see those bars. And I got the idea from Ludwig Wittgenstein, my favorite philosopher. And he basically said, and this is my parting, Garrett, oh yes, we're in time. He says that philosophy was for him therapy, so as to speak. Yes, that's what philosophy is for me too. It's therapy. It's a therapy to undo some of my conditioning, some of my well-honed truths, and to be able to see them and to create perspective. And so therefore McGilchrist and also Kahneman in his way has been extremely valuable. It's helped me to have a more, I feel, a more a comprehensive view of the world. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you got something out of it. And let's have a good, healthy discussion. I don't need to be the center of the conversation. My intent was simply to shake the tree a little bit, and I hope that I've done that. And with that, I'll pass it on to Garrett. And if I can work out how to stop the screen share, let's have a look over here. I just need to go out. I'm working with 3 screens, and how do I stop? Oh, okay. But Garrett, I'm passing it over to you while I.
Yeah, I'll remove the screen share just 1 second. So I would like to ask everybody to in the Q&A portion, limit comments or questions to 1 comment or question at a time, and the length to less than 2 or 3 minutes. We'll have a timer hopefully be publicly shown. And then if after someone makes a comment, you want to respond to that, feel free to just speak up. It's just easier if people just speak up. We can't keep track because there are 3 screens of people here. So, but feel free to ask clarifying questions of people. And, even a little bit of back and forth is fine if people want to discuss and debate amongst each other. And Remco will kind of be fielding the questions, but also, as he said, we like people to be able to interact with each other in the group too, although we do have 62 people here, so it gets a little complicated. But this is great. So that said, Remco, do you want to call on people or do you want me to?
Garrett, I would suggest that you do it.
Okay. So
and I think I'd like a dynamic where there's an interflow, and I'm not want to be the centerpiece here.
No, that's fine. And that's where I said, if people, David's going to go first. If people want to respond to what David said, keep the responses to like less than 20 seconds, like short, questions to ask, like understand what David said, or a quick rebuttal if you have a different agreement. But keep it short if you're responding to someone. I don't want, and also make it in context of what the person said, rather than starting a whole new subject, because we have a line of hands and we want to let people introduce new subjects with that line of hands. But then we can have some back and forth on what the person whose turn it is just presented to the group. So that said, David, go ahead.
Remco, that was great. And, you have a great grasp of this, helping us. And, you're being very clear, but it's a lot. I can't say that I'm not stumbling along. So forgive me. So let me ask some questions. I think it's good to know yourself, and this is helpful. But I'm trying to see how to get more out of it than the idea that there's this rational component, that the left is the rational component. And I mean, if that's so, then why do we have a different terminology? Why are we spatializing it? Or what's the importance of the spatial image and all that? So that would be my basic question. I understand we're calling the right the more humanized unity. So if the right is this unity, sort of without the reason, reflecting, self-examining, abstracting, it needs the clarity of abstractions to know anything. Because knowing is using concepts, using thinking frames, that are developed. So, but so the right may be the knower, except it can't be that in this model because you said it's unconscious. So we can't sit there knowing anything. So no, somehow I don't know what the right is, but the left seems to be the rational. So what more is it than that? Thanks.
Yeah, David, all I can say is it's a journey. It's a journey from going from a 3-pound organic slimy mass to something which has a little bit of hinting of difference. And I think it's allowing that difference to emerge over time. I think it's, I fell into my own trap by being too defined, too about the blind man and too much about the ancient Chinese looking master. It's a very polar view. It's nuanced. All I can say is, and also at the same time, be mindful of Kahneman's thesis. It's You know, I just a little example. I just little example. I'll give. It's not really answering your question because there's nothing more I can say. I live on the side of a hill here in a forest area, and I have a motorbike, as you've seen. And when I leave the garage, I got to leave sideways, and it gives me the creeps every time. But you know what I've done is give myself permission to look at where I am ultimately going to be and forget about how I'm going to be there. What I'm implicitly doing is handing over to the master, handing over to system one. And when I first moved into that house, I was really very unsettled. And my motorbike weighs nearly 300 kilograms. It's a heavy monster. Now I'm perfectly at ease because I've handed over to the master, or if you like, the system one. It knows. It's like when you're riding a bicycle. You don't look at the curve, you look at beyond the curve. Same thing. Anyway, I don't know what I've answered you, but that's
well, thank you. You know, that's a good perspective on it. Just want to say it reminds me of playing the piano. You work on all these details and, you know, sort of training of details and left mind stuff to really discern. But when you go and do it, you're jumping off the mountain, right? I mean, you know, like letting it flow in a way that it's a completely different approach. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic presentation, Remco, and thank you again for the time that you put into that. One question I had is, like, when we were going through this, was this how you were expressing our relationships today. Specifically, you said, you know, that they were based on utility more than feeling, which is interesting. But my guess is, or my thinking is that, and that they're based on complementary factors versus actually just being, you know, kind of more of a based on feeling. But is that really a bad thing? I mean, is it not really more of a problem of philosophy not being taught to appreciate the right values, versus the idea of using a rational way of approaching a relationship? So in other words, I can rationally come to the conclusion and understand that I ought to be grateful for the person that's right next to me. And that's a rational thinking. But if I'm not taught to be grateful, then it really doesn't mean anything. So it's less about the rational mind getting in the way of our relationships, and more about I would say, the understanding that someone has, which is more of an indictment of more of educational or external things than it is the actual biological underpinnings that we're talking about here.
Yeah, wonderful question, Joe, as usual from you, and I love your reflective questions. Look, I think I would suggest my answer, and I would welcome any interjection from somebody on this one, is that need and utility is very ephemeral. And so if you marry somebody for the utility, that they are complementing, they are helping you, that utility will shift over time, and you'll be looking at your partner with different eyes. And I think perhaps the Spaniards and maybe the Italians as well, the Spanish have two words for love. They have the word te quiero and te amo. I don't know where I pronounce it there right, Garrett, because I know you speak Spanish, but te quiero is the more common expression for love. That is meaning I need. But the rarer one is te amo, and that's not so spoken so commonly. And that is just that beingness with the other one, where you just are with the other one. That's all I will say to that. Utility has a limited currency, and that is my concern.
That was good, Remco. Te quiero y te amo.
Okay, gracias.
I just briefly respond to that. You know, I mean, just briefly, I mean, I think that I agree with you, right? In the sense that just being with someone and appreciation with someone. I don't necessarily see the complementary part as something that is going to necessarily devolve over time. If anything, I think it could evolve into something stronger, into the fact that you become more interdependent on one another. So the idea that you're complementing each other, you realize that that other person is fulfilling a need that you're unable to complete. And I'm not saying these relationships should be transactional without feeling or anything along those lines. I'm just questioning the underlying thesis that feelings are somehow a sustaining factor in a relationship versus sometimes complementary and rational thinking, more than rational thinking. I do think they're both complementary in themselves, I mean, in and of themselves, but anyway, that's just thought.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And I'll just simply say, don't forget that the feelings could be the whispers from the unconscious. And I think it's important to get that there may be something there, and you might need to just go for a very long walk to get in touch with what those feelings really are, if you can. Anyway, enough said on that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Carrie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Remco, very much for your time and efforts here. I just had a question if you're familiar with either Lisa Feldman Barrett's work on emotions and brain function and cognition generally, or Robert Sapolsky's work. He just recently published a book on determinism in lieu of free will and whatnot. And just if you had any comments on either of them.
Oh, look, you've opened the Pandora's box there, Kerry. Sapolsky's, yeah, on determinism and free will. I mean, there's a lot of discussion and debate about that, but I think it's worthy. I'm going to dodge it. I think it's a good question, but I really feel that this is, perhaps down the track, I could do a presentation on free will and the evidence for and against. But that is going beyond the division of the mind. My intention was to just create a little bit of feeling of the brain is more than just 3 kilograms of organic slush. That's all I was really wanting to do, and using 2 templates to do that. Outside of that, yes, you have free will determinism. I can't go beyond that, partly because I'm probably, to be honest with you, Kerry, I'm not that familiar with Sapolsky. I've certainly done a lot of reading in quantum mechanics and on the subject and messages from that. But look, I think we'll have to move on from it, Kerry. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, we will probably do free will again, Carrie. And Remco, if you want to collaborate on that, I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah, let's not digress though onto free will, because that's a whole nother topic. But Jameson, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Remco. That was a great presentation. I appreciated it. I was just gonna make a comment on how you opened up with the left brain, right brain being completely kind of a new age type bangle thing. I forget what you said, but you said something about it, they work together, and I believe that's what you said, from what I remember. And I know that I saw the first video and I read the Kleinman thing, and I've heard some of the other stuff from other author you referenced in your presentation. And the clinical work of the Kleinman, to me, kind of aligns with like the Huberman, the neuroscientific efforts where they're kind of measuring the electrical performance of the brain, and then not only correlating, observed behavior out in the world with the way the brain's firing. And then like the video described how the left and the right brain kind of work together with the front somehow regulating the two. I was just curious if you were interested in pursuing things like that, and your presentation was good, and you had some pretty good areas where topics like that might answer some of those questions about how the left brain and the right brain, or at least the attributes that we associate with each of those sides, kind of work together and then produce that that phenomena, that third phenomena that we all have a hard time grasping, I guess. I don't know, like what AI does, pretty much, where it's adding everything together. And I kind of view the philosophy as like a way of cognition, a thinking. That I've read some philosophers just say it's just a methodology of thinking. So like correlating that with the functional firing of the brain and where it occurs in the brain and how the brain works biologically. Wondered if you ever thought of pursuing that as a thing. Does it make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Jamison. Thank you for your comment and question. Look, the only thing I'll say is I would have been quite relaxed had McGilchrist avoided the left-right brain geographic, I guess the word geographic basis. Had he said left focus and right focus or some other words, he has, however, chosen, and because there is some evidence to support the thesis of the left-right brain divide, and perhaps he's right, but unfortunately you get into contentious territory, and I really am not personally very interested in the neural design and the functioning. I'll leave that to others. I'm quite happy with the empirical approach, and in many respects I prefer Kahneman's approach, talking about systems. That's all. And I'll leave that to others to find the empirical evidence for their, not empirical, but material evidence for the thesis. So, yeah, thank you. That's thought-provoking.
Oh, thank you.
Great, thanks. Rose, go ahead. You're on mute, Rose, if you're speaking.
Hi, thank you so much. Great presentation. I just have a quick question. What is your recommendation for someone who has very strong left brain and on the other hand has very strong right brain? You talk a little bit about the bridge, and I'm sure these two units are complementing each other, but you also mentioned that they are separate units. So can you just explain more about the bridge and how to interconnect and optimize each unit working together?
Oh, look, yeah, very good question. Very, very good question. Look, I strongly believe that it's the process of observing yourself where the magic lies. It's the process of catching yourself out. You're having an argument with somebody, a heated conversation about some topic or another. And if in the process you could just stop for a second and just think about what you're doing. And I've often have to say, oh, I'm in my left brain, aren't I? And just walk away. And if not physically, at least, in the engagement. It's just giving yourself that freedom to allow the brain to flow, having that corpus callosum handle the information, left, right. It will do the thing. It doesn't need us. We have no management over it. But what can happen is that in the process, in the heat of the moment, with my example of an argument, that in the heat of the moment, you will stay in that left brain until you suddenly catch yourself and say, oh, yes, I'm in that left brain, aren't I? This is the minefield, I feel, that Kahneman is talking about. He talks about the minefield where you will make the same mistake time and time again, but at least you can raise a warning flag and say, hey, I am doing this, aren't I? Would it be right brain or left brain or whatever you might be doing, system 1 or system 2, is just catch yourself at it. You know, when I'm on my motorbike and I'm having to make that steep turn down the driveway, to realize, oh, hang on, just a moment, relax, allow the master. And it makes a huge difference to my experience when I go out on my motorbike, let me tell you. And I'm just using a physical expression. There are very many other expressions. So to answer you, Rose, learn to observe yourself and just reflect on the presentation today. Read both books and just allow to just percolate, allow to, in my wife's term, marinate, allow to marinate and become part of you. You'll still make the same mistakes, but you'll learn to just be more relaxed at times when there's a temptation to be too engaged in system 2, too engaged in the left brain. Thanks for your question, Rose.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. So Remco, I have 2 questions, but I'm going to start with one because we have to do one at a time. So I feel like the right brain is like the spiritual side, right? Where, you have intuition. And, when I did my presentation on when to use reason and intuition, I largely argued that we should use intuition to come up with the assumptions, which is like the right brain is coming up with the assumptions. Then you throw it to the left brain to draw conclusions and then send it back to the right brain to put it in context. Is that like an accurate description of the way that McGilchrist describes this?
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. Yeah, sort of. I mean, in a way, it's what you said about the right being more spiritual. But just think back to the example, and I love the example of the Galileo affair. How challenging it is. How challenging it is to say that the Pope was more rational than Galileo. How absolutely confronting it is to your sensibilities from a 21st century man to step back to say, well, actually, if you were there 4 centuries ago, would you still hold that harsh view on the Pope? And look, I'm not asking you to adjudicate. Let's not adjudicate on that particular example.
Yeah, we don't agree on that one, Remco, because like the Pope was actually the reason the 30 years war was started in the first place. So it really all goes back to the Pope was the guy that was doing all the bad stuff.
Yes, I know. So, I'm going to do I will be doing a presentation on that down the track. I've got my slides in preparation. It is confronting, but look, at the very least, give him a little bit of space. So that is, I think, the important part. Think of the right brain as just being a whole, everything, just everything. Don't think about it as a right brain. Think of it as the whole. It is everything. It is when George Bush went into a desert storm, he talked about a crusade. What a mistake that was, because for the Muslim people, that was a crusade. It was 1,000 years ago. We've forgotten about it. For them, it is still very current. And that is the important message to get. It's that holistic, that bigger picture, to be a little bit more kind to the other, to develop some empathy. Empathy is not a capacity of the left brain. It is not a capacity of the left. And I think that's the important bit, empathy.
Thanks, Remco. DLJ.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Mary Beth had her hand up long before me, and I think her hand went down by accident. So, Mary Beth, do you want to go next?
You're on mute, Mary Beth.
Great. This is my first time here, and gosh, I'm loving it. It's like a discovery. And I know this is probably off context, but not for me. Wondering how this might relate to symptoms of ADHD. Or you could have no.
Yes. Yeah, Mary. Yeah, good one. A good hit there. ADHD. Yeah, well, look, we it's a topic that we haven't got time to discuss, but it's certainly something that I've felt for some time. There is a marked difference between the French, who have about a 4% rate of ADHD, and the Americans, who have about 8%, something double. And you have to ask yourself, what is it? What is actually going on? And I've often wondered whether and I have a feeling that McGilchrist also talked about it, that the ADHD are out of context. You know, they're captured by their left brain, and what they possibly might need is to be taken out of their environment. It's the environment that is at issue, not themselves, to be able to recover themselves in a world which is not so left brain dominant. They're struggling with the bittiness of the left brain. But yeah, it's a good question.
That I really related when you said is blind, because one of the true aspects of ADHD for me is something called time blindness, where you just really kind of, it's just like not here and it's not here and it won't be here for 3 weeks, so why pay bills? Not that extreme. Just interesting to note.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Great, thanks. DLJ, thank you for pointing out that she had her hand up first. I didn't notice that, so I appreciate that. Always a fair man, and appreciate it. And thank you, Mary Beth, for your comment, and welcome, by the way, to the group. We hope to see you back again. And go ahead, DLJ.
Yeah, ADHD is a good question. I'm in the process of developing lots of tools for people on the autistic spectrum, and I've been looking into these very subjects. But yeah, okay, Remco, yeah, love the artwork. I'm so jealous of your ability to do that. My clumsy PowerPoint looks awful in comparison. Less happy with the content. I think there's some fundamental errors, which I don't know where to start with them. So I'll just pick on a small thing instead. I just got confused, maybe because I can't retain which is attention deficit, left or right, system 1, system 2, and I keep getting them all mixed up. So the emissary system 2, right, is blind. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And yeah, okay, and yet on slide 17, there was a slide that said the emissary who is blind is conscious. And I don't quite get how you can be blind and conscious at the same time.
Yeah.
Help me out with that.
Yeah, that's fair comment. Yeah, that's correct. And I think that's the important part. They're both Kahneman and McGilchrist, whilst they have different emphasis and a different content to a large extent, both of them agree that there is a conscious part, and the conscious part in the McGilchrist thesis is the left brain, and that's who we think we are. And it's the word consciousness is a difficult word. Perhaps a better word is with awareness, the unconscious being subliminal, and maybe there are better expressions. But yes, definitely, that is how it works. The unconscious does the work to a point and then hands over to the left brain for conscious processing. And at that point, we are doing conscious manipulations, calculations, thinking, processing, and then it supposedly should be handled back to the right, and it isn't across the bridge, across the corpus callosum. It doesn't always happen.
So they're both conscious, is what I think I heard you just say, right? So the emissary is doing the conscious processing.
Yes, correct.
But according to Kahneman, is not the conscious one.
No, he makes that point that system 2 is the conscious part. That does he has a different entry point. In fact, he doesn't even agree with McGilchrist there. They have a disagreement there because the input for Kahneman, I haven't gone into it because we don't have the time. All I could do was take out the common parts. And if you are thinking to introduce a flaw and you're saying that system 2 is not blind, that is partially, yes, that is partially true in the case of Kahneman's thesis. If that's what you're saying, okay, yeah, fine.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Mary Beth, Go ahead. Oh, was your hand up from before? Sorry, Jameson.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again for the slide. It was interesting, and I'm not sure if it seemed like some of the left-right attributes in the emissary slide seemed to swap a little bit. I was just trying to keep track of them, but someone asked something about what attributes to the spirituality side or the religious whatever side. I would kind of suggest that the right side that has the emotion. One of the slides contained it containing that emotion, and one of the things that I've noticed that's missing in that dimensional presentation of how the left brain works is the time thing. Like one mentioned with missing time occurring, it's like an emotion that you evoke, that kind of persists frame by frame as you sequentially go over what's happening in your left side. So like if you, at least that's what supposedly, neuroscientific, when you look at it symmetrically, like functionally, and how those functions would like interact together to produce the emergent phenomena of spiritual. I have a gut feeling. Well, that gut feeling is your brain evoking an emotion from a memory, and where did that come from, and then how did it interact with what other side of the brain, and it expressed itself in your stomach tightening up, and your hands getting sweaty, and your brain racing and thinking about particular memories associated with whatever thing, and then your left brain is kind of regulating that, flipping through it frame by frame. So that side, when you say conscious, it's like it's what you're kind of seeing running at the time, and if you get blocks or it stops flowing, it doesn't work, right? Is that like a good analogy?
Yeah, thank you, Jameson. Well, I mean, remember that the right brain, or system one, and they're not, by the way, they don't map exactly. They're quite different ways of looking. So, but I do tend to sometimes talk about them as if the system one is your right brain. Don't forget, you cannot. Your right brain, it processes without your awareness, and it's extremely confronting. I mean, and when it communicates through things as emotions and feelings. That tightness in your stomach, these are all manifestations of the right brain. And if it is so, and look, this is conjectural, that most of your processing happens subconsciously, subliminally is probably a better term, then you have to listen and watch those points of discomfort when your stomach is contracting, to ask yourself what is actually going on at that point. You may not be able to discover it directly. Maybe you need to work with somebody to use them as a mirror. And it's an important point to use another person as the mirror, because you can't see yourself. And that's another interesting topic, by the way, Garrett. You could get into Gödel's theorems there.
I will get into that on the free will evening, because that's
good.
What the basis of my argument for free will is.
Yes, good one. Anyway, so that's all I can say, Jamison, is, your right brain is communicating. And how is it communicating? Well, it's not communicating through words. And if you could stay with that, then you're creating an opening to give yourself some space to reflect. That's all I can say. That gut feeling.
Go ahead.
There we go. In reply to Jamison there, that's how the right brain or system one works. My understanding, and sort of experientially and in exploration, is it's like a sponge where you drop indelible ink into the sponge. You know, the brain is a physical, biological thing with all its networks and neural pathways. And for example, in the case of trauma, it becomes extremely embedded but unconscious, and it's triggered. And so there's senses sort of coming into that unconscious world. There's a swirl of all sorts of things going on. And how I see it is you can't rub it out, you can't eliminate it. You have to work with it or maybe override it. You know, if you put black ink indelibly, maybe you need to put white ink in until the black becomes a bit gray, to sort of diminish the impact of it. And I think at a survival level, it's like, you know, when there's danger, whether it's perceived psychological danger or physical danger, somehow system one seems to take over and draw on whatever it's experienced in the past, whether it's speed, direction, who's dangerous, who's not dangerous, all sorts of things like that sort of come into play in the most miraculous way. But I also think on the creative side of things, there's this swirl. But if you give the brain, and you probably have to then use your system to create a focus or a vision. This is we do mission statements in corporate and things like that to sort of direct that mush of all sorts that sits there in the right brain. And that's where what are apparently miracles happen. If you said cooperation is our focus, and you don't always have to define it in too many terms, but it sort of starts to mold the thinking of those working together. If you want to buy a vintage car, suddenly that sort of focus will sort of be there, and suddenly you'll be saying, oh, there's all these vintage cars on the road. But it was probably no different to before. Something has, the left brain's put something into the right, and the two together have sort of given you a different perception of the world, because we can't see everything, we can't take in everything. Somehow we have to give it some kind of focus to be selective. So if you're wanting to write some sad music, you've given your right brain a kind of focus for the creativity around sadness, or, you know, a special dance that's going to make everybody happy. You sort of, but what actually comes out could never have been produced by the left brain rationally. It came from another space. And it might be what sad music that you've heard in the past that sort of comes in together in a remarkable way. If you're particularly talented or free thinking, I'm fascinated by it all, especially the more creative, intuitive side of it all, and the potential there that's sort of been blocked out by a lot of our Western left brain kind of education. That's where their focus has been on assessment and achievement in a very defined quantitative way. And we've sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. So that's sort of my vision there, and a sort of an answer to Jamison, perhaps, or my perspective on what he was asking.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, for your comment there. The only thing I'm going to say, and I'm repeating myself here, the only thing that you'll be able to do is to observe yourself. You can't, we haven't got any dials or any internal software that we can manipulate to balance ourselves. But what we can do is just watch ourselves. And I've found over the years that I've dramatically shifted, just simply by saying, oh, Rem, you're doing this again. I remember when I first was exposed to, the opportunity for the intuitive, I used to basically fall asleep. I couldn't handle it. It was too confronting. But over the years, I've softened to the point where I'm much more accommodating. So that my answer is, Di, it's all about observing oneself and just learning to love who you are and give yourself permission to allow for fuller integration. And that's where I talk about going for a walk. So thanks, Di.
Great. Carrie, go ahead.
Just a quick question for you, Garrett. Has the free will discussion been calendared yet, or should I just keep my eyes open?
Keep your eyes open. It has not been set up yet. I just realized tonight that we should do it again. We did do it a long time ago, but I think it was like a year and a half ago. We were a much smaller organization then, and I think we would get a lot of interest in it again. So I also think we might have lost the recording of it. So I usually don't repeat stuff that we've recorded, but I don't think we have that one. So if we don't, then I'll definitely do it again. I probably need to anyway, given the book, but you know, people seem to, I did read into his arguments and I didn't see them as novel, to be honest. But I'll go ahead and address that night. So anything else that you wanted to mention, Carrie?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So Remco, you mentioned the back and forth between left and right brain. I had a professor teach me about the back and forth between romanticism and realism that's happened throughout history. It seems like there's a parallel between, you know, romanticism or right brain and left brain or realism that might be parallel to that, where the back and forth you're talking about is going on along with realism versus romanticism. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that's it. It's in my talk on postmodernist philosophy, I introduced the idea where postmodernism was attempting to avoid that swing from had that pendulum, you might remember, from left to right, from the objective to the subjective, from the out there to in there. And that, so your example is just one particular time when you could talk like that, but there have been swings over the millennia, and to me it's just like another manifestation of, you know, the rational versus the, you know, the Apollonian versus the Dionysian, the rational versus the more integrated view, our view of Galileo versus our view of what the Pope might be. These are all manifestations of the same thing, in my view.
Great. Jamie, go ahead.
Hi. First, thank you so much. This is great. And I heard in a lecture that brain is not like there are specific parts for specific things or functions. Like this is for speaking, this is for I don't know, imagining, or for other parts, for digestion, for whatever. Is this, yeah, I heard that it's not like there are parts for specific things. So if we lose part of our brain, we can train it and it will learn to do all those functions again. Is this true? And how this fits with this, I don't want to say left and right, maybe system 1 and 2. Can you please tell me, is this, first of all, true?
Your question is whether you can train. Is that correct? Is that your fundamental question, Jamie?
You're saying that we have like either left or right. I guess you said not focus on left or right. I like to say system 1 and 2.
All right.
So if is it true that our brain, if we lose, say, half or 1/4 of our brain, the leftover, we can learn to live again and do everything as usual, right? Like it's not a specific part of brain, or you know how they divide brain, they say this is for, I don't know, emotions, this is for speaking, this part is for digestion, this part is for eye, this part is for that. They say is not like that. It's not a specific parts for those things. It's just if we lose a quarter after a while, then it learns, the brain works on its own and it learns to do everything. Like all neurons, whatever is in there, they learn to, again, they fire with each other, they learn to do everything. Is that true? And how that, considering that, how we could have like system 1 and 2? I'm sorry, if it's a nonsense, then just ignore my question. But if it's just, it won't leave my mind.
All right. Yeah, okay, Jamie. Good that you asked the question. Look, my response is my intention was not a neuroscientific presentation. I don't want to go into the area of how the parts of the brain work and how they're integrated, and I'll leave that to others. And I don't think that would be helpful. I think it would be confusing, and in fact, it could actually be destructive in my view. I'm not here to teach my brain any tricks. I had to think back to once I did 10 days of Vipassana meditation, and in those 10 days it was, on the floor at 4:30 and off the floor at 9 o'clock at night, no talk, no eye contact and all of that. But at the end of it, I concluded, and it was the feeling like I was being taught to teach my mind a trick. And meditation to me is a trick. I don't need to learn any tricks. What I need to learn is to be more relaxed and at one with the world. And how do I do that? Is to learn one thing, and that's to learn to observe myself. And I think these two great minds, McGilchrist and Kahneman, have given us some tools to do that, and that's all you need to say. If you want to go into the engineering of the brain, well, I leave that to you or to others. That is not my intent. I just like to be able to be more flexible, more accommodating, more relaxed, more accepting, more empathic with the world. That's all. And I know my own skills as an engineer, former engineer, economist, and whatever else it was in my career. They're tools that are always available to me. But what is not available to me is to trust in my intuition and to trust in my master, and in particular, once I know that from my own experience, to allow to absorb into my beingness. No, I'm not there yet. And as my dear wife, who spoke a little bit earlier, said, talked about, she knows
Yes, I
that's
believe
still
in
a struggle.
all.
And that's all I'd like to say that.
Yes, I believe in it. Thank you so much. Thank you. This was great.
Thanks, Jamie. Jameson, go ahead.
Yes, what was regarding the last thing you were talking about, how things kind of swing between whichever and the Apollonian, the like the stringent or the discrete. I'm not sure, like you were talking about societally, the way we were thinking and behaving, and then your slide made a assertion that the society was becoming more left-brained type of thinking. I don't know. I'm mirroring back what your presentation told, what you meant your presentation to say, but that's what I got from it. And I was just curious, because like I go back to, I'm a big advocate for trying to get those things to work together. Because like I read a lot about framing stuff. So versus seeing myself in a cage, I'd rather visualize myself on a road. Now I can see a road as opposed to seeing bars dissolved away, just as a matter of perspective. And that's more philosophical, I guess, than functional. But I know that the AI phenomena is like literally an expression of organic, logical thinking, the best that a human can come up with, using power law and all the facts and extrapolating the best decision. So we know that's the case. I was just curious if, like the traditional adherence to, I'm quoting specific philosophers or contextualizing in older ideas versus now where we're at in this age of generative AI, GPT, where it's supposed to be able to consume all of these ideas, good, bad, otherwise, and then yield a decision that is reflective of what's best for the system's goal. system one and system two, if we were putting it in, that context. So I was wondering, like, moving forward, would you kind of see that as like maybe a next evolution and thinking to address the question about a system one and system two and the way that they interact, is looking at it analogous to, the simple way AI logically comes to its decision conclusions, barring any bias or, influence, undue influence.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I introduced the terms as Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, introduced it, and that was the Apollonian spirit and the Dionysian spirit. It is on the same basis. The Apollonian is left-brained, and the Dionysian tends to be more right-brained. And for goodness sake, it is not I'm not saying to you, I'm just saying as a generalization. When somebody says left brain, it doesn't mean 100% left brain. It is a slight disposition towards, or it is a swing away from the more integrated view. It is just a slight disposition. To some people, it's extreme, and we know some politicians are like that. But, by and large, when we use a label, there's a downside. If I say if somebody is left brain or somebody is Apollonian, that's just me speaking as a moment of time and a tendency towards. That's all. And if there's anything you take away from the talk today, if there's anything away from it, is that there are people that are more left-brained, right brain, more system one inclined or system two inclined, or whatever you like to say. There are other dimensions you can talk, but it's just having that awareness and to be able to just recognize, without having made this presentation or without having read those books, you may not have had that awareness. I certainly put my hand up and say, no, I did not have that awareness, and I'm very thankful to these two authors. And all I can say is my own experience is that it has dramatically affected my comfort with the world, and I think it's from that comfort, from that personal evaluation, that I enthused and took the time to make and share that presentation. Take out of what you will. If you don't like it, if you think it's too dramatic, and you feel uncomfortable, well, good. Perhaps over time that discomfort might help you see something in yourself that's holding you in a particular place in the world. So that's all I was intending to do, and that's all I don't know whether I've answered your question, Jamison. All I'm going to say is just be a little bit kind to some of the words that I've used and say, well, look, I'm only attempting to present a view, and that's all.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Yeah, DLJ, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, not a question. It's just that everybody else has stopped talking, so I thought I'd chip in. I wonder whether left-right is actually even the right way to think about it. I mean, yeah, trying to map it onto where the brain does its processing does make sense. But wouldn't it be, well, I'll just give you this for food for thought. Think of it instead as front office processing and back office processing. So the front office stuff is the sales team, got to think fast, highly conscious, therefore, using tools like Excel, probably making lots of errors, short-term thinking. Back office is your financial systems and your risk analysis planners and all that kind of stuff, which is therefore the slower, right? So front office, back office might be another way of, I think, even more accurate way of thinking about it. Just food for thought. Chew on that. Next time we meet, we can have a conversation on it.
Yeah. I think unless DLJ, I think you're making a fair comment. That's all I can say. Is there a particular question you want me to answer there, or is it? So
no,
basically agree
just
with
sowing
me.
some seeds there so that we can talk about it next time we're in a breakout room or something.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, there was a comment just on the side there, but I haven't really got time to answer. I was talking about the differences between Kahneman and McGilchrist. Yes, they're different. They're very different ways. but it doesn't matter. You know, and I'm sorry, I'm not answering you. I'm answering a little bit as a generalization. All I'm trying to do is just take that homogeneous sense of your brain and just try and see that there are some available ways of looking at the world, and take out what you like, and don't be too polar. Sorry, DLJ, I'm just taking the opportunity to meander off your topic, but
no, it's all right.
It's just being a little bit, you know, a little bit more accommodating and just getting away from that homogeneous lump of grey matter in your head.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a question. So you ramble away as much as you want.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, Rose, go ahead.
Just wanted to emphasize that this is very valuable. This presentation is very valuable, and we both understand it. I'm also an engineer, as a mechanical engineer. My whole career, everything was toward being left brain. And I feel like the right brain got suppressed when you are in this type of career, which is like very organized, systematic in this environment. Your intuitive side of you is like suppressed and ignored. And the same as you mentioned, for me, the same thing when I got older, then I was more aware and more in touch with the right brain, and understand the value of both brains, then you can, you know, you can use both of them and you can appreciate both of them. Thank you so much. It was very valuable presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Yeah. If you, like I say, maybe the only thing you'll take out of the talk, hopefully, is what Einstein said. If you don't like anything I've said, maybe just what Einstein said about, you know, acknowledging that intuitive side to you. And I, like I say, I was particularly guilty of denying myself that. Anyway, thank you, Rose.
Will, go ahead.
Hello. Thanks, Remco. Love the presentation. Thank you very much, as always. I've been a little bit distracted today. The springtime here, kangaroos fighting, and then the koalas get involved, and it's mayhem, you know how it is. So I've been a little bit distracted, but I'm just wondering if you touched upon the practical benefits of mindfulness meditation in quelling the left side of the brain, the hypothetical left side of the brain, and its constant narrative, because I think it's quite valuable to acknowledge that meditation is the way to fast track towards that preferred state of not over conceptualizing everything. As I understand it, from my limited knowledge of the master and his emissary, the emissary is just giving the constant narrative, and we are quite neurotic, especially in the West. We're overstimulated. The capitalist models jump on board with our constant need for satisfaction and entertainment, and we're all quite neurotic. It's almost steeped into collective insanity, many would agree. But the antidote is commitment to meditation practice. I'm wondering if you agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Will. And yeah, look, as I said, you may have been out. I shared that I did do 10 days of Vipassana. I found it a challenging experience to sit and be totally out of contact with any other person, and to just be with yourself. And in particular, I learned how the chatter in my brain, and it's not a matter of stopping it. It is a matter of observing it, just observing it without engaging it. And I noticed that one of the great minds in this world, whether you agree with him or not, I still would argue that he's one of the great minds, is Yuval Harari, and he spends 2 months a year, 2 months on Vipassana, and so obviously he also sees a benefit in what you're saying. Look, whatever tools, whatever techniques, and whatever time is available to you, I keep saying and feeling very strongly, it's just learning to observe, just watching yourself. And I think just watching that chatter and not engaging it and just letting it be and just say, look, okay, thank you for that. Next thought. Actually, that's a good killer, by the way. Next thought. You ask yourself, next thought, and there's immediate silence. It's amazing. I've found this time and again when there's something is punching me, particularly when you have a particularly strong cognitive mind. To say, okay, next thought, and there's silence immediately after that. And to just be aware and to say, look, it doesn't matter if I'm conscious to it. The right brain was doing my processing. Go to sleep, and it's amazing how often I come up with an answer in the morning. Absolutely amazing. So thank you for that, Will.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Will. Kerry, go ahead.
Okay, this is more of a quick comment, unless I get this completely wrong, and then I hope Remco will jump in and correct me. But doesn't Kahneman spend a lot of time at the beginning of his book talking about System 1 and System 2, essentially just being metaphors for how you can understand things, rather than there being this discrete system that's completely independent from the other one? It's more of a way to help you understand the way your brain functions in different ways. And then he kind of goes off on his tear. I mean, is that accurate?
Yeah, perfectly put. And look, I slipped in Kahneman at the end. Be honest with you, I slipped in 3 slides, knowing full well that I was actually digging a hole for myself, creating an opening to be dismissed, because there are some fundamental differences. And the debate will go on for some time, but I'm happy, I'm comfortable with inconsistency. I personally find it's interesting and it works. I sometimes will adopt Kahneman, and in my motorbike example of going down the hill is a classic adoption of Kahneman's thesis. In a way, also, if you like, McGilchrist, but that's okay. There is, in time, it will equilibrate, and I'm certainly, as a result of reading those both books, feeling. It's the feeling in me. It's the feeling in me that counts. That I feel more comfortable, more relaxed, more at one. And they made a contribution, as did the great philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein, in particular, and Nietzsche. It's an ongoing process, and I refuse to take on any one person as my guru. I will never take on a guru. They've made their contribution, and each of them are, in Wittgenstein's terms, a ladder that once you climbed with them, you dispose of it. That's all. Mm-hmm. I will not talk about it. And that's it.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that
as
I didn't mean that as a criticism at all. It's
no.
It's a pragmatic approach, which is kind of what I think most of us as living people in the world are looking for, rather than something that's so unwieldy it's impossible to use.
Yeah, that's it. And just let it percolate. It will take time. Go and read another book. Go and read. If you love Kahneman, and hey, he's far more popular. Remember, I said he was 10 times as popular as McGilchrist, but good reason. But go and read McGilchrist. And if you read some other things, and gradually, you will start to see things. You'll see the bars of the caves that you have. Love them all. Thanks for that.
Great. Yes. Mary Beth, you'll be next after ES. Did I don't know if your hand went down again by accident, but I have you as after ES. So
okay. Hey, thanks. Really interesting conversation. Thank you. I was wondering if there's much information about, and I don't know if this is an appropriate question here, so please defer if it's not. So when people get brain injured or they have medical issues that affect brain capacity, or accidents, aging, blindness and deafness, maybe new blindness and deafness, we see how like the brain compensates in different parts of its system differently. So I wondered if this and like maybe loss of some senses and development of others, and I wondered if there's much information on how these intersections happen in context to your subject matter. Like if people like you're talking about kind of intentional knowing and transitions, but I'm wondering about unintentional ones, like how does that work out? If this question makes sense, I'm not sure if it does, if I'm explaining it well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was also at the same time trying to process a question on the side of the chat. Sorry, Eos, if I look again, it's just being able to recognize the dispositions of your mind. I think it's just dispositions and just a bias. And if, I'm sorry, I can't say anything more than just learning to recognize the dispositions and yeah, and the importance of language as well. That's something I haven't talked about. By the way, just in brackets, a great talk was by Jill Bolte Taylor on TED. She was a neuroscientist who had a stroke and lost her ability for language.
Yes.
And how she recovered recuperated with the help of her mother. And an important point was that until she learned the language again, and there was a left brain that was damaged. The left is the center of or predominance of language. Until she learned language, she was not able to assemble the jigsaw pieces. She had to know side and top and colors before she could assemble the jigsaw pieces. Now, look, this may seem totally unrelated to your comment there, ES, but I just wanted to say that all you can take away really, and all I really want you to take away is that feeling of this is all about discernment, and that's it. Learn to discern, and that's all. And there was something else that David was saying. No, it'll come back to me later. My brain is cooked. Sorry, thank you. Was there anything I missed, DS?
No, I appreciate that you came back to the baseline. That it doesn't really matter what the state of the brain is. It's always coming back to what capacity you can to that discernment.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if some will be in a more gifted place than others, depending on the makeup. You know, that maybe this hard work isn't as necessary for some issues and others, but for some for some people's brains than others and worlds than others. Like who are the lucky ones? So.
Yeah. And look, yes, I remembered what I was going to say. I was struggling with that. It was just a comment somebody made on the chats on the side that I just want to address. You know, I think it's important, and Garrett, if we're going to introduce Gödel's theorem, is that you cannot fully describe yourself, or at least you cannot be certain about aspects of yourself. And perhaps I'm going beyond what Gödel's saying there, but that completeness theorem. Importantly, it takes another person because you cannot see yourself. I'm very clear on that. I cannot see myself. And my dear wife is my soulmate. But you know what I say? You know who my soulmate is? My soulmate is a person that destroys me. Now I get eyes, flinch at that. The soulmate is a person that destroys me. And that is who I see my soulmate. And my wife is my soulmate. We argue a lot. We're very different people. We see the world very differently, but it's very helpful. It helps me see those bars that I talked about at the birdcage on my final slide. And that's really what McGilchrist and Kahneman, for me, they're just helping me see the world a little bit more without those bars sitting in the way. Anyway, just had to say that because I think there was a comment there by somebody that was hinting at that. Anyway, thank you for that.
Sure. So let's try to keep comments sort of short. We're going to close out after the next two hands. Mary Beth and David are going to be the last two. So Mary Beth, go ahead.
I will be brief.
We can't hear you well.
Oh,
no, not yet.
Is this better?
Try talking closer to the mic.
Is this better?
You're very quiet.
Sorry. I'll just say it really quickly. Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. What I want to say is, Remco, please do not apologize for having touched your intuition and for teaching the spectacular results that can happen from the commingling of your intuition and intellect. I feel like you've said it so many times, and it's a brilliant strength. And it's a brilliant strength to teach and communicate and connect. And I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Mary. Look, I think I do have a problem. And once I was in Mexico, and they called me the Lo Siento hombre. I don't know what I'm saying that, Garrett. Well, Lo Siento is sorry, man. I used to say sorry a lot. And it probably goes back to my early days before I learned English when I was an immigrant in Australia. I was bullied, and through my career as a chemical engineer, I became the sort of the guru in the industry, and I've found myself on the other side, on the wrong side of the fence of the multinationals. So yes, I have a pain body at work, and I have a discomfort when somebody talks about the nonsense,
like cookies,
and that still sits there with me. Anyhow, so yeah, thank you for that comment, and we're running out of time. And I'm sorry I answered a bit long there, Garrett. I think it's David's next.
All right, I'm going to let David go, and then we're going to close out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in terms of someone saying, my partner is the one who destroys me, I think words sort of matter. I hope you mean it in the sense of someone who works with me to dissolve my boundaries in a cooperative, comprehensive way, joining me, dissolving me, not destroying in the sense of hostile, obliterating and annihilating. So I think words matter, because as much as it may make us sound religious, speaking in that way is actually in tone with humanism, I think. So words matter. Thanks.
Yeah, no, very true. Look, I have an aptitude for being sensational, and I use those words because you'll probably remember it as a result of me uttering it. Totally agree with you. A better way to do it is a soulmate makes visible your bars, your impedance to seeing the world. That's a nicer way of saying it. And you're right. Neuro-linguistic programming would also endorse your views. So thank you for that. I hope you will also give me the grace that I am a bit of a showman, and I will at times overstate something. But it has its benefit. You'll remember it, even if you don't agree.
Yes, it's the meanings of the words are used to make a display. I understand.
Yes. Yeah. But she does destroy me, and I will hold to that, and that's cool. I love it a bit. At times we.
Congratulations.
Anyway, thank you, David. Thank you, Garrett.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close out there. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Thank you, especially Remco, for presenting and answering so many questions. Really appreciate everyone coming. Hope to see a lot of you next week. I'm going to talk about generous capitalism, which I think is the next stage of capitalism. And the CliffsNotes version is that who would rather do business with a greedy company rather than a generous company? And if that's true, we just need to have more founders creating generous companies and watch those generous companies take over the market share from the greedy companies. And that's what I'm trying to do with my company. And I think that it's a wave that I hope will begin and sort of change the face of capitalism as we know it for the better. So hope to see you guys next week at that. There's a link to the event on capitalism where you can go to the FTI meetup or whatever meetup you were in. You should be able to see it, although I heard it's not in the Toronto one. We will get it added, hopefully overnight. So thanks a lot again, everybody, and have a good day, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world, and hope to see you guys again soon. Take care.
And thank you, guys, everybody there. Thank you so much for your intelligent questions. I got a lot out of this. I often find I get more out of presenting than I actually and answering the questions. So yeah, it's been a great session. Thank you, Garrett. I got a lot out of it. Keep going,
Thanks,
mate.
Remco. We did too. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.